Hello, I'm joined today by Sián from Inventory Base and James from Save2. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, David. Really well. Lovely to see you.
Hi, David.
Nice to have you both with us. We're coming together to celebrate, or to at least talk about Gas Safety Week, which is an odd thing to have a week for, but let's face it, it's one of those things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis within the lettings industry, and gas safety has always been that basic standard that's kind of drummed into you the minute you start to do anything with lettings in the slightest. It all seems to center around that, because it was always the most important and most legislated area in terms of basic safety. But there's always changes, and there's always updates, and there's some changes coming soon. So perhaps you could sort of tell us a little bit about those changes that are coming soon on the 1st of October.
Well, if I start, I mean, the reason Inventory Base is supporting Gas Safety Week is basically that everybody needs to be safe in a home, whether it's rented, whether it's residential, owned, etc. And the actual Gas Safety Week, the initiative, is actually in its 12th year, and it runs between the 12th and the 18th of September. But I think this year is more important than ever, purely because we've got some new legislation coming in as of 1st October in regards to smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. But also we've got an energy crisis going on, and obviously a lot of people are worried about that, how they're going to heat their homes. And I think one of the things that we wanted to really impart to everybody that's going to be watching the recording, watching the webinar, is to understand there is some things that they can do to help increase energy efficiency, but predominantly keep safe. So that's why I thought it would be great to have a chat between yourself, me and James today about it, so we can hopefully give people a bit of advice, a bit of guidance, a bit of support and understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody that thinks this is a sort of a niche discussion, something that only the geeks in the letting industry are interested in talking about, it's all over the news at the moment. It's on the national TV and mainstream media. It's in all the newspapers. People are sort of giving advice about altering the flow rate on your boiler in order to make it more efficient. I mean, it's crazy, the fact that you can pretty much switch on any news channel at the moment, and there's something in there to do with trying to get the best out of your energy efficiency out of your boiler system. But let's not mess around with this. We're also dealing with something that, if you don't treat it in the right way, it's a safety concern, because this is gas. These are things that need to be dealt with correctly. So make sure that you get the right advice from the right people, and hopefully I've got two of them here with us today. So one of the areas that I suppose landlords know that they have to do to get a gas safety certificate, so they know that they've got to keep up on that. If they've got a good agent, they'll also be told that they've got to keep on top of carbon monoxide alarms, etc., etc., all the other bits of ancillary pieces that go into this sort of area of focus. But a lot of them don't necessarily undertake regular boiler maintenance on top of that, and they do the bare minimum that they could do. Why should landlords invest in it?
So you mentioned two things there. The gas safeties, everybody, landlords knows to get the gas safeties done once a year, for sure. But one thing that I feel they struggle to, and gas engineers as well, to realise, is that the gas safety can actually be completed 2 months prior to the expiry date, and actually keep the same expiry date. So while we're September, if it runs out in the 1st of November this year, for example, you can have it completed now, and keeping the 1st of November expiry date 2023. It's something that was brought in a few years ago, but it's failed to trickle down a little bit, like I said, to both landlords, letting agents, and gas engineers as well. But it was brought in like an MOT style thing, so that it doesn't lapse, as landlords, rightly so, well, waiting for the last day or the day before the expiry date, and then obviously, tenants wouldn't be in, or gas engineer wouldn't turn up, and then it would lapse. They'd be in trouble. So yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to get across. Every gas safety week, try to there's ample time for you to get your gas safeties done. 2 months before, start the ball rolling. Let's get it in. If there's a failed appointment or two, it doesn't matter, because you've got all of that time to try and redo it. And then you also mentioned about the carbon monoxide alarms as well. So that regulation is changing. Again, it's all in the news. Everybody knows about it. But yeah, 1st of October, everybody must have a carbon monoxide alarm for a fixed combustion appliance, so like a boiler or a fire, for example.
So that tackles the sort of certification side of things and the things that you must have in your file. And let's face it, what you've said at the moment, yes, it's the correct practice to get them ordered in time, but also it's one of the most stressful things where you've got a move-in date and you're trying to sort of juggle everything with last-minute inspections. Give me one contractor that always turns up on time for every appointment and gets everything done on the day and never has any emergencies.
I do.
Yeah, there's one there.
I can say I do.
Right. You could come and service my boiler later then.
Well, I probably wouldn't be able to do that, but I could definitely do your inventory report. But I know what you mean, though. But there's always kind of like things always going on, especially
that
now.
Rush, yeah.
Yeah, student season. I mean, everything. We're getting to literally the last parts of the student season. The majority of it's been done, but it's always these last few days, last week or so, that actually cause a problem. And all of a sudden, that's when they think, oh, I haven't got a CP12, I haven't got a gas safety certificate, and then they go rushing to James, to Safe2, going, please, James, can you help me out here? And like I said, but this is why you need that preventative maintenance kind of hat on. Think about these things, get them in beforehand, or give them to Safe2, give them to James, so they will plan that for you, or they'll put that in for you into the planner. So you don't even have to think about it. They'll just call you, book it in, rock up, get it done, off you go. So that would be the ideal case scenario. But we know life isn't not necessarily like that.
Yeah, you can have the best contractors in the world, but at the end of the day, things happen and it doesn't get done. I like to think that we've solved the problem of managing the dates and getting them done, but there still is a trader or two that has a bad day and won't turn up. So it
happens to the best of us. We all, I mean, there are days where valuations need to get cancelled because life happens and there are delays for whatever reason, and that's why it's always best practice to sort of plan ahead and not leave it to that last week. Why put yourself under unnecessary pressure?
Exactly.
But just to sort of roll this back again, going back to sort of servicing and maintenance, you see, a gas safety certificate to me is going to be an absolute must-have because I need that for compliance. When you say the word safety, it's servicing or maintenance, to me it feels like a bit of a luxury service. You are taking that one step further. You're not just checking that the boiler meets a minimum safety requirement, but you're also making sure that it's running more efficiently or running as efficiently as it can. And which leads me to my next question. Surely we should all be doing servicing and maintenance on our boilers right now ahead of winter to make sure that we're going to be able to reduce our bills however we can. How much effect does it actually have on our consumption?
So if only everybody thought like you, David, it'd be a lot easier. Do you know what? It makes a massive effect. It really does. So servicing a boiler is not only checking. It's like we mentioned before, that proactively trying to find any faults or issues, things like that. It makes it more efficient, and obviously right now is more important than ever to make sure your boiler is running and operating the best and the most efficient it can. So even a basic service will at least clean it, clean the burner, make sure it's running right, making sure it's clean inside, vivid out, things like that. And obviously with the rainy season, a lot of rain can go down the flue, and that will be caught up in the trap, which is fine. If it's a dirty trap though, then it will just overflow and spill into the burner, so that will make that even worse. So it's just that basic, even just a basic service not only makes it run better, and it's that preventative maintenance to make sure there's no problems coming up.
It's definitely I think going to be worth getting ahead of that. I suspect that this winter is going to be busy for a number of different reasons. with everybody tinkering with their own central heating systems, things are also bound to need experts to step in from time to time. I am guilty of having listened to the Radio 4 special on how to get the best out of your boiler, where they were trying to explain over the radio. It's very difficult to do without a visual. Exactly how you can alter the flow rate on a standard sort of condensing boiler in order to make it run more efficiently. I'm presuming if I were to call you guys out to do a service on a boiler, then whilst people are there, whilst the technician is there, they're going to be able to adjust that as well.
Yeah, when you're testing or servicing a boiler, it needs to be put into maximum rate and then minimum rate as well. So you can sort of not only compare the difference, but you have parameters that they need to be in. But yeah, the most boilers, especially newer boilers, they all have like an economy setting. So there's ones that you can have like preheats, so it'll heat a little bit of water inside. So when you turn the tap on, you get hot water almost instantly. And once that's run out, it will then heat the rest of it. This is a combi boiler, but also you could set it into economy mode, which it doesn't heat up that little bit of water and uses it when you need. So there's things you can do.
So I guess this is maybe a question for Sián, with your experience in the letting sector. For years, HMOs have always been one of those situations where you pay a round figure for your rent. It includes all manner of things, but it will also traditionally include energy bills as well, or your portion of it, because I guess for landlords, it's been hard to apportion the spend to each room, and very rarely are they all separately metered and all that sort of detail. But that's been the deal. You pay maybe slightly more than you might normally do, but you do that with the comfort of knowing that at the end of the month, you don't owe anybody any money because you've paid your rent. That will include all your other outgoings as well. Given that the energy crisis is going to drive up bills for landlords, are we likely to see that change?
I think we are. I mean, there's a lot of talk that I see across multiple forums across the industry about fair usage. What is fair usage? I mean, some people like their rooms cold, some people like their rooms hot, other people like their communal areas, a tepid temperature. Everybody differs, and all good HMOs have, temperature controls, have the ability for the tenants to be able to control that so they can get the best and comfort out of it. But obviously with the rising of bills, it's going to cost the landlords more. So there's a lot of conversation about, what is fair usage and whether those HMO contracts can be changed mid-term or they fixed at a certain point. So a lot of people are starting to have a look at that, because quite rightly, a landlord's pocket is not bottomless. At one point or another, these kind of fees, these costs are going to have to be passed on, not because they're trying to shirk their responsibilities. It's just because at the end of the day, if the rent isn't covering the utility bills that it was meant to do, someone has to pay for that. So obviously there's got to be a fair usage kind of like terminology applied to it. So I think you're going to be finding a lot more HMOs looking at those contracts, looking to the tenants, looking to raise those rents. And of course, then tenants themselves are going to be looking to see, okay, well, how does that affect me? Can I afford that? Can I turn up the temperature? Can I have the temperature at a reasonable temperature that means I'm not going to cold? And also the fact that the effect on cold has with the actual property, i.e. if you're not heating it enough, you're going to get condensation and mold. Is that going to cause damage to your clothes and your wardrobes and stuff? It's not just about turning the heat on and off or who pays for it.
That's so true. That's an accident waiting to happen this winter, isn't it, really? If people start to cut back on certain things and heating, and we're not ventilating the rooms accordingly because you're trying to trap all the natural heat in there, you're going to have that condensation issue. It happens almost in every property. If you, I mean, it would happen in your own home. It's nothing to do with the standard of the property. It's how you run it and how you make that air circulate. It's science.
Exactly. And but it's just a true fact. At the end of the day, we breathe out hot air, and if we're not ventilating, if we're not allowing that to go somewhere to dissipate, then of course then it's going to get trapped in the room where you're at. And then of course then it's that whole issue of the heating side of it. If you feel that you can't afford to heat it, then you're going to leave it off. and then how do you keep the property warm, and all that entails. And that kind of like dovetails in what's happening with the 1st of October with the carbon monoxide. If people then start to close up the windows, don't ventilate, and there is a problem with the boiler and it is producing carbon monoxide, and they don't have a carbon monoxide alarm, then there's a real safety risk there. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily correlate the two. You know, they don't necessarily think one will affect the other, but it clearly will, which is another reason why, you know, I'm sure James will say in a second, this is why it's vital to get the boilers maintained and regularly maintained and get the right alarms in place, because if they don't open those windows and they're not ventilating it and there is a problem with the boiler, sometimes that will be too late to notice. And then, you know, we could be looking at something obviously a lot more serious.
Yeah, I agree. And again, from your sort of the point of view, Sián, inspections, do it more often. You know, there's with HMOs, it's very common to just let it run its course and not so much, you know, but yeah, now more than ever, it's inspections. And, you know, tenants, even the best of tenants sometimes will leave the heating just on and have opened their windows rather than turn it off. And if you're there to inspect this, you know, you can stop it happening.
Yeah, it just makes it a much safer environment for everybody, and at least with the inspections as well. In a way, we kind of need to get away from inspections and more about property visits, because inspections feels very kind of like draconian. Yeah. It's almost like I'm going to come, it's a bit like the Sergeant Major coming, you know, with a white glove, you know, I'm going to come.
Random spot check, yeah.
Exactly is, yeah. Well, I've done that in the army, so I know what that's like, but it's not like that at all. But it gives you the opportunity to test the alarms. The alarms need to be tested. The amount of times I speak to a tenant and say, when did you last test the alarm? And they'll just look at me and go, didn't think I needed to. You know, you're 6 months in and you're not testing. It should be testing every 2 weeks at least. I mean, I prefer if they tested every week, but the likelihood is every 2 weeks, maybe once a month, but at least testing that to make sure that they're safe. And then, like I said, those inspections to see, you know, is everything okay? And sometimes, you know, as inventory providers, as professionals, we see things that other people don't see, because obviously they're busy, they're doing things, you know, they've got life to lead. They don't want to worry whether the boiler's flashing or whether, you know, something doesn't look right and there's too much condensation, or, you know, there's smell of gas in the property as you walk in, because they're so used to it that they've just stopped noticing. So these inspections have the ability not just to make sure the property is okay, but make sure that the tenants are safe as well. And surely that's got to be worth at least one visit every 3 months at a minimum, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it doesn't, and the consequences of not doing these things and not working them into your routine and your systems and the processes that you have in place, basic safety, but also as an agent, you dread the day when there's any major incident that then brings you under the microscope for everything else. And I think we need to sort of keep ahead of these things and make sure that we're educating landlords and tenants, and make sure tenants understand what their responsibilities are as well. Insofar as you mentioned testing, you know, earlier, it's not often clear to people exactly who should be testing what and when. So these are all things that we could do. But for landlords that are looking to sort of get on top of their costs and sort of monitor the energy usage, some of them may not now know that whether or not they need to increase those bills, but they're looking, you know, at that long-term future in terms of keeping on top of it. Very often landlords are obviously managing at a distance. What devices or software, what tech is there out there that can help us sort of keep on top of it?
So, well, we mentioned boiler servicing. That's obviously one to go back to. But as in terms of tech, I mean, the smart thermostats are brilliant. They've come, you know, leaps and bounds since you know 5-10 years ago. They're amazing now. You can see everything and every usage, and you can also have full control of it. So if you went back to your HMO example, the landlord can see exactly when and how much the heating has been on and how much is being used, and have control of that to lock it, not lock it certain times. So there's definitely that sort of stuff. And then it goes back to the basics of, you know, LED lighting. You know, if you're going to replace an appliance, an oven, for example, or a microwave, try and get one that's energy efficient. I did hear the other day like a microwave that has a time clock on it. It's like £26 a year or something like that now. I haven't verified that at all, but someone did tell me that it was madness. So try and get the efficient appliances. At least.
I think you're talking about Boris Johnson's kettle, right? Well, it's worth mentioning. Boris has given us electronic advice as well this week, and people have been talking about more energy efficient devices. And obviously, yeah, you're right. We live in this sort of utopia at the moment. If you're looking to buy a new electronic device, every single one of them has a rating on it. You can. I mean, I was looking for this is going to sound like an extravagance in this day and age, but I was looking for a replacement dishwasher the other day. And on the website that I was using, it was able to tell me what amount of money on average a certain rating was going to save me per wash or whatever it is. And these are things that we're now going to have to think about and to take into account. So I think it's really important.
I think also, just getting back to the whole appliances and sensors, though, is something that, Inventory Base are doing. We've got the ability to talk to sensors, to grab information from a sensor that's positioned around the property. And that could be a heat temperature, could be humidity, could be carbon dioxide. So you can understand whether someone's in the property, because obviously we breathe, in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. So these sensors can actually pick those kind of things up. They can pick up sensors of around about your weather, pick up information about meter readings, etc. That can all be drawn in real time back to your dashboard, to your report, to be able to kind of like inform on the property without necessarily even having to physically go there. You can get a really good understanding. So the tech side of it is really coming alive at the moment. I mean, I know we talk a lot of prop tech and people go, oh, prop tech again, but there's so many solutions out there now that's available that then can plug into the systems you're using, the inspection systems, the property reporting systems like Inventory Base, that can really help you inform. So like you said, you can have that light touch. You don't have to disturb your tenants, but you can still have an understanding of what's going on, what needs to be maybe looked at. So I think that from that point of view, that will help with people's understanding of energy usage, how they run the properties, and obviously from a cost point of view, make sure certainly when it comes to HMOs that whole fair usage policy is exactly that. It's fair.
So for all this kind of landlords and tenants that stumble across our content, because I know when it comes to the agents, they'll probably know the answer to this one, but just remind us again, Sián, how can landlords and tenants check that their gas engineer is properly qualified and insured to undertake that work?
Well, I mean, in a way, James is the best person for that. But I know from my personal point of view, Gas Safe Register, that's where you check where your engineer is coming from. They should all have their IDs. They should all have on their IDs exactly what they actually are allowed to do, i.e. they're qualified to do. And they should be checking these things. I mean, I don't let anybody in my house unless I know who they are, and I want to see an ID. I want to know who they are. But that way, then you're guaranteed that you know who's coming to the property. And also from a landlord point of view, it's about the fact is if you allow someone to do any work on your property, on your boiler, on your gas system, and they're not qualified, then that's where you get into very, very deep water. But James would be able to know more about that than me.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that anyway. Yeah, I mean, it seems like tenants are almost embarrassed to ask for a card. But I can tell you, any gas engineer would be proud to show their card to anybody.
They've worked hard to get it, yeah.
They've worked hard to get it, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a badge of honor. So if anybody was to ask to see it, they whip it out straight away. So but the biggest thing on it is to look at the back and to make sure they are qualified to do so you have your core gas, and then you have your appliances. You have boilers, fires, cookers, space heaters, warm air. They're all separate, as well as LPG and things like that. So just make sure they are not only gas safe, but they are also safe and qualified to do the work that is at your property. Before I shut the door on you both, see, this is going to be a really interesting segue here. Before we close the door, let's talk doors for a second. Fire safety, the doors. I know that if we're fully refurbishing a property from the ground up,
one of the things that building regs always stipulate is that the doors should have a certain fire rating. Very often, though, in the houses that we manage, we're inheriting doors that have been there probably older than me for sure, and I wouldn't know necessarily what the fire rating is, or whether in fact it needs checking, changing, replacing. Is it important? Am I making a fuss about nothing?
No, it's very important, because you think about it, you know, if you're going to be gas safe, you need to be fire safe. That's the whole point. So that's one of the reasons why the regulations are coming in for the 1st of October, you know, about having smoke alarms on each and every floor, or every story or living area, and the carbon monoxide alarms regards where there's combustion, a boiler, a open fire, or like a burner, etc. And obviously, if anything goes wrong, if fire starts, then one of the things you need to do is be able to get out the property. And the whole point of the fire doors is to help, you know, secure that area, to keep the fire at bay, to allow people to exit the property. Obviously, we don't have enough time to go into the whole thing of what each door is and what it does or what it shouldn't do from a technical point of view. But certainly we should be checking our fire doors, especially in HMOs, because there's specific licensing requirements in regards to fire safety about that. But even in your normal rental properties, if you think about it, a fire is naturally, or normally rather than naturally, likely to start in a kitchen, likely to start in a garage area or in a loft area. So to make sure that your door is secure, you need to be able to make sure that it can close to frame, but also make sure the gaps are correct around the edges, so that, you know, smoke doesn't get in, fire doesn't get in, gives the occupants time to get out. So that's something from an inventory-based point of view that we're doing. We've already developed templates. We're already developing some help and guidance around that. And I think it dovetails really nicely into what we're doing here with the whole gas safety week side of things, because if you've got a boiler that is well serviced, if you've got a property that's well maintained, and you've got fire doors that do exactly what they should be doing, then the occupants are going to be much safer and more happier. And in a way, then you can forget about it. You can live, you know, do the things that you want to do and not have to worry about those things, because the professionals are taking care of it, which is the whole point of, you know, what what James, all of these engineers do about keeping, you know, the boilers and everything maintained and safe, also from an electrical point of view, not just the boilers type.
Yeah, it's not something that any of us can afford to cut corners on, or cut costs on. It's a false economy for sure, but it's also people's lives that we're dealing with, and it's probably the most important element of what we do from a safety point of view. And I know that James and his team would ably guide you through it. Lovely people to speak to. Sián, immensely helpful as well, from a very sort of hands-on inspection point of view. I think you've seen it all by now, but there's new stuff to incorporate and learn every day. And obviously these changes that are coming up in October are worth getting ahead of and getting on top of now. And anybody that needs any help on this whatsoever should definitely reach out. All your details are on kerfuffle.com. It's always great to catch up with you both. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Pleasure.